All right. Are you ready to recruit, socialize, and disengage with me in Module 8, Chapter 10? Discuss effective employee recruitment and apply the stages to your own employment history. Now, from the perspective of an employer, effective recruitment ought to be planned out and budgeted to put in the necessary effort to bring in quality hires. So in our book, Branham estimated that in their 2000 book titled Keeping the People Who Keep You in Business, the recruitment of higher tier candidates can cost 25 to 200% of their salary. Of course, that's not per person. It's just overall they may seek out many candidates, and filtering them down and meeting with them would end up costing 200% of that one individual's salary. That estimate seems kind of high, but the title of the book does hint that it's biased to the idea of holding on to good employees rather than falling back on the expensive process of recruiting new employees. Figure 10.1 shows a breakdown of the model of employee recruitment. That's by Briot, McCann, and Grambo of 2008. They are objectives, strategies, activities, interviews, and then the results afterwards. This model can give you a perspective that a lot of thought and planning should go into vetting candidates and into the types of legwork and communication that it might take. I'd like to point out the absolute lowest level of effort that an employer could make in planning might be just to putting a plastic help wanted sign up in their front window and hope that some random person who's also an outstanding candidate just shows up and grovels for the position. And this might be a good situation for a high turnover job where they just need warm bodies to fill the positions. I might add that other more modern forms of lazy recruiting would involve things like spam email campaigns and billboard ads targeted at no one in particular. It's just, hey, this is a fun place to work. But the higher levels of recruiting would involve starting with internal soul searching. And I mean, you really are you're thinking about, okay, what do we want our organization to be like? What are the real qualifications that matter to us? That sort of thing. Then writing out a specific and realistic job description. Going out and networking. That means not just throwing out blanket spam campaigns, but actually going out to try to meet people. This could include engaging with longer term prospects. Maybe you're trying to get some people who might be interested down the road. Meet with college seniors, go to a networking event. And you're not like trying to be slimy headhunter type person where you're just trying to lure people right now. You could just say, over time, let's work up to some position that would work out for you. Okay, also conducting initial meetings face-to-face or via rich media. The book talked about once you've filtered out the candidates, you can narrow it down to a few, and then you want to start meeting them in person. You can meet them through a Skype session, which is okay. You can also do the thing where you both fly into an airport and meet in a conference room there, and then they fly back home. Various ways that you can kind of meet in person without getting too committed. So with all of that effort, it is conceivable that the efforts could be costly. It reminds me of the small provider recruitment department we have at my company. It's a team of, I think, 3 people. Their job is to seek out quality medical professionals, such as doctors, physician's assistants, and nurse practitioners, to contact and build networking relationships, and then to persuade them to join the team. Or maybe they're just putting a bug in their ear. Long term, let's think about, next time your contract is up, think about coming to us. For myself, I wasn't really recruited. I don't know if I've ever been recruited. Even when I joined the Army, I showed up the recruiter's office and asked they didn't come to me. But I am sure my manager put in a lot of effort at my current job. They put in work planning out the foundations of the position, looking through screening candidates, conducting interviews, making the selection based on critical factors. I mean, they figured out, okay, what is important and what's not. And one of them, I think it came down to one of the most important factors that, guided their decision was how would it affect the existing team. I know I'm awesome, but it took my charming personality to win her over. So let's talk about quickly just a couple other forms of ways that people recruit or just employers meet job candidates, applicants. So there's headhunters, of course, where they're out like sharks looking for people who are in good positions and they try to lure them away. There are job fairs where 50 different employers meet 500 different people looking for jobs and they just throw resumes at each other. There are professors like here at Spokane Falls. Brady occasionally gives us little hints like, hey, so-and-so is hiring, or give me your resume, sort of thing. There's websites like Monster and Indeed where you can, again, spam your resume and, see if anything sticks. And the beloved Army recruiter where I bought him lunch, instead of him really trying to persuade me. Special nod to the RJP, the Realistic Job Preview, which inoculates or it helps you self-select for the job. I might talk about this a little bit later, but the idea is an employer really ought to be upfront about what the job is all about. That way, either you're going to be shocked but then prepared, or you're going to be shocked and like, this job sucks. See you later. Okay, so a little more about that later. So use an example from your personal professional history. Explain Jablin's stages of organizational socialization and how does it work. Jablin, if that's how you pronounce it, he or she came up with the stages of organizational socialization from page 295 as anticipatory socialization. This is just after the hire, you've accepted the job offer, but before we're going to work. Organizational assimilation, where you've actually entered the position and then you move on to metamorphosis. And then the organizational disengagement or exit, when things don't work out. You split, or you're asked to split. The anticipatory stage starts with accepting the job offer, doing the initial paperwork and orientation, and being ready to come up for the actual first day. I'm so sorry, I've hit 7 minutes and I'm not finished my first page. I've got 3 pages. So sorry. In many cases, that may all happen on the first few days of when you get hired, doing the paperwork, new employee orientation, getting your shots, getting an employee badge, all these things that involve getting started in the company before you actually sit down and start taking phone calls or sending emails. But Jablin distinguishes the very first phase of the pre-entry, and that the employer can begin opening up and revealing about the organization. This involves impression management from page 298, where the employer can just keep quiet, or they can start to pass some revealing messages, nonverbal signals about what it's like to work in this organization. They can give you a feel of what the environment is like, the client. They can immediately start treating you like dirt or immediately establishing a relationship of respect. It happens early on. Okay, so this is where positive or negative surprises can come up, such as welcoming, like building up the idea that you are welcome and valued in the team, or a toxic tone can start to emerge. They can be subtle or pretty blatant. This is where an RJP, the Realistic Job Preview, should have occurred already. This is before, hopefully during the interview actually, at least during the orientation, before you've signed anything, you'll know what to expect. So if you come in to the job first day and you realize, oh crap, I'm going to be exposed to toxic chemicals and I'm going to probably die in 10 years, that's probably a negative surprise. You're going to feel a little buyer's remote about signing in with the company. If the messaging is positive, though, they'll be more prone to buy in. You'll be like more engaging. Like you'll pay more attention. You'll invest more. You'll decide to be more disciplined, work harder. So with the entry, this is where you're showing up for work and getting started. The new member begins to be assimilated with the climate and the norms, as well as actually building the necessary skills to do the job. I've been a new employee a few times, and I know for the first few weeks or even for the first few months, I felt it was pretty useless compared to other people. I'm still stumbling, like I don't get it, I forget things, make mistakes that are costly setbacks to the rest of the team. Realize that it may take a while for me to actually be worth my pay, but soon enough, days, weeks, months, I'll get up to speed and be a real team member. And this is termed the metamorphosis, where I'm no longer a setback for the rest of the team. Page 299. I've been in a job or two before where I actually never got up to speed and probably was just a loss for the company. This was at a company that was a fabrication for integrated circuits, and my job was to get the printed wafers after they've gone through all the machinery. Get them up and look at a microscope and do little tests. I had very fine little, contacts that would meet at the right little paths and send a little current through there and see if it has the right logic. But what I would invariably do is take a wafer and just smash it up against the little probe and make a big scratch, like a scratching record, and wreck that wafer. Oh, next. And I did that, for probably a couple of months before I self-selected that I suck at this. Okay, also, unfortunately, I've lost my enthusiasm for a company or just screwed up. So I've gone through the voluntary and involuntary turnover. So the third phase of socialization is falling out of favor with the company and disengaging. And that is voluntarily leaving to take another opportunity or being let go, that's a nice way of putting it, because of the employer's dissatisfaction. How do you believe adding new members to an existing team might impact or potentially re-socialize members of an existing team? This chapter turns out to be really relevant for me now because I was recently hired on as a new team member in a new kind of role for me. I've performed in a lot of IT type roles, tech support, sysadmin, implementation, but now I'm doing asset management. It's a lot more like being a bean counter, an accountant, a warehouse clerk. And there was an existing team of 2 individuals who have been in those positions for many years already. And they've each settled deep into their own particular ways of doing things. I'm in training with both of them on how to be a backup for each of them. And so I'm doing my best to have a great positive attitude and to be open-minded, even though I believe I have a lot of experience already. But now I'm the junior guy. On the one hand, I know they appreciate having someone to relieve me, to relieve some of their heavy workload. They're constantly facing a couple hundred tickets in their queues, and sometimes they get sick, and things kind of fall apart when that one person is out of commission. But on the other hand, I can sense that my mere presence causes a little friction since they're used to doing things their own ways for so long. They each have particular ways of doing things, and so one of them will train me how to do something, and I'll make the huge mistake of applying that same sort of methodology when I'm working on the other person's queue. That other person kind of blows up on me like, "You suck. Don't do that. You're stupid." So now I have to think of 2 different rules when I'm working on their tickets. So we'll work that out, I believe. Fortunately, my manager is great at keeping a respectful environment, expecting professionalism, and mediating. So I found the list of dead-on arrivals from page 300 to be particularly useful. Things not to do when you join a new team. As it points out, even if I think I've been around the block, it's not my place to start out being stubborn and entitled. I still have to do the pits, the putting in the times. I have to follow the rules, take feedback, keep focus, etc. So table 10.3 on page 301 is also a good breakdown of the dimensions of socialization resource theory to ensure I ask for and acquire all that I need to fit in, to get up to speed and to be my best. I still believe I have a lot that I bring to the team, so over time I'll prove myself and then I'll respectfully offer my ideas. Apply the material to your own experience of leaving organizations. How accurate is the textbook description? What might be missing? So again, I'm going to refer back to chapter 7. This is Adair's 4D followership model. We may start out idealistically and highly motivated to do a good job. We may exhibit the disciple frame of mind of high job satisfaction and productivity, with little to no thought of wanting to work somewhere else. However, that can easily slip to the point where you don't feel committed to the team. Your productivity suffers, and the environment feels, wait for it, here it comes, toxic. Yeah, my favorite word. And you leave voluntarily or involuntarily. It happens. Page 305. Jablin, love that name, sounds like a goblin, is cited again in the context of the steps of disengagement, 305. They are pre-announcement, announcement of the exit, actual exit, and post-exit. If it's voluntary, you may come to realize in the course of your job, it may be early on, that you realize that job is not what you expected, and you will start to explore your options elsewhere. You were promised, I knew a guy that was promised he would just need to join any MOS in the Army, and then he could get his foot in the door and then get transferred over to be a warrant officer, helicopter pilot. And he started to realize after a few months, probably not. And so he hated life, and he found some way to get himself out. So misplaced, bad expectations. So you'll start to explore other options elsewhere by sending out resumes or getting in contact with another recruiter. If you have a solid work ethic, once you've made your decision, you've actually got an offer from somewhere else, you may continue to produce responsibly well at work, and then at some point you'll kind of let everyone know the day of, like, I'm out. In an involuntary situation, though, you may just let your enthusiasm and productivity slide into the dumps over time. Both cases are in the pre-announcement phase, where you're already thinking about it, consciously or unconsciously, and you're either starting to conspire in your own mind or you're in denial about it, and you may be giving your subtle or not so subtle cues about it. With the open announcement of exit, you either give your 2 weeks, where you hand in a resignation letter, or you have a friendly visit with your boss to break the news, and you give a period of time where you'll still show up to work, but effectively you're gone, you've checked out. In the involuntary case, though, your boss will probably invite you into their office for a surprise meeting with the presence of a surprise security guard to escort you for an expedited exit. It's interesting that the post-exit phase gets some analysis in the chapter. I appreciate it. In both cases, it may take some soul searching. The involuntary exit has the exiter has to deal with the mistakes they made, the circumstances. How did this happen? But I mean, that's just the short term. The long term is you're going to be explaining for years the follow-on employers about the situation, and somehow putting it into a positive light, and somehow convincing them that you've overcome it, corrected it, grown from it. In a voluntary exit, the remaining employees may have to process whether there's something deficient about their workplace, how they'll deal with handling the workload, being shorthanded, and whether they might consider looking elsewhere themselves. I can see a parallel in my own experiences where I've either gotten surprise visits and expeditious escorts, which took years, I'm still dealing with, to sort out emotionally, to experiences where I knew I was not satisfied with the situation, and within a day or two I knew it. And so within a few months I just started to make arrangements to pursue other opportunities. I started working on a certification, I got personality tests, looked around at other employees, all while I was holding a job, but eventually I found another one, less paying job but a better situation, and made a graceful exit. So this section was actually short, which I appreciate, but it would have been interesting to get a little more insight onto workplaces that are at will or can terminate for any arbitrary reason, whims of the employer. Ideally, in a more professional environment, you would hope that an employer will be able to justify their personnel actions with a history of performance reviews, warnings, and explicitly unmet objectives. That's probably not very common, since a lot of the decisions are based on intangible perceptions like you just rub the boss wrong. You're weird. You are not likable. I mean, a lot of times it's hard to say why. They just don't like you. Although a manager may just come to a personal conclusion about the suitability of an employer's place in the company, I wonder if there's been any research on whether it's worth the time and effort to document and try to rehabilitate the employee versus just cutting them off when they're no longer fun to work with. Thanks, everybody. Please comment. Have a good week.